of the council. So just wanted to say a few quick words of thanks to Kath for her service here at the council over the last 7 or 8 years. I think if you're going to pick 7 or 8 years to be working social care, the years that covered 2 years of COVID probably added more variety to the role and challenge to the role than perhaps at other times. So just on behalf of everybody here, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for your service to the council, and I hope you enjoy your break now. And I know you're coming back to work with us on home care in the future. So thank you, Kath. Okay, I shall turn to the agenda and the formal items at the top. So item 1, are there any appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents, please?
Thank you, Chair. To confirm, no appeals have been received for today's meeting.
Thank you. Are there any exempt items, please?
Yes, Chair. Should the board be agreeable, Appendix B to item 9, which is Capital Receipts Programme Update, will be considered in private at the conclusion of the public part of the meeting, due to being designated as exempt from publication under Access to Information Procedure Rule 10.43.
Thank you. Are there any late items?
No late items of business to consider, Chair. No.
Thank you. I'll turn to the board and see if there's any declarations of interest. Don't see any. I'm going to look. Item 5, turn to the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of December and check that the board confirms they are correct record. Take it the board is happy with that. We've got a slight adjustment to the order of the papers, and we're going to take the 4 papers under the resources portfolio first, so and then move on to adults, children, social care and health partnership. So Councillor Cooper, please, item 7 we'll start with.
Thank you, Leader. And in introducing this paper, we do have with us today Executive Board Chief Superintendent Steve Dodds, who's further down the table there next to Paul Money, who is the Chief Officer for Safer Leeds here at Leeds City Council as well, who may want to speak after I've introduced the paper. I think just for a few introductory notes, I'd just like to say that this is the first time we've brought a report of this nature to Executive Board, and it shows our intention to keep Executive Board completely informed of the work that's ongoing through Safer Leeds, and we intend to do so on an annual basis. Safer Leeds, as you know, set its strategy for the priorities, and they're all laid out in the report. There are 9 shared priorities to do with community safety activity in the report. I think it's really important at this point just to say that that Safer Leeds, the work that we do at Safer Leeds Executive and the boards that sit underneath that framework is all done in partnership across. So it's not just us as Leeds City Council. There are many other partners, and West Yorkshire Police being the major partner within that structure, which is why Steve's with us here today. I thought that it's important that we bring a report to Executive Board, as we've said, and we'll continue to do that. I know that in the report that it does mention some successes as well that we've had throughout the time of the partnership, and if we just think about the success that we've had through antisocial behaviour with the partnership work we've done with the universities and others, the success of the work that we've had through the support that Safer Leeds has given to the street support work that's integrated in the city centre as well. There are a number of others that are really worthwhile. I hope you've had the chance to read the report, and I'll leave it there for now, Leader, and if you'd like to invite the Chief Super to maybe say a few words.
Thank you. Chief Superintendent Dodds, please.
Yes, good afternoon, board, and thank you for the opportunity to come and be part of your meeting this morning. As I've already been introduced, but I am Chief Superintendent Steve Dodds. I'm the Leeds District Commander based at Ellen Road. I've been in post since June of last year, so very much still the new boy on the block, so to speak, but really keen to continue the partnership work that Councillor Cooper has already referenced in her introduction of the paper. I have just over 23 years policing experience. I started in Leeds as a police constable many years ago, so it's nice to come back into the role that I'm in here today. But all of my service has been across West Yorkshire in operational policing, particularly around neighbourhood policing, which I think is quite pertinent when we look at the report today. I think it's fair to say that it is an extremely challenging time for policing. There's a couple of points very briefly that I'd like to make. So I think one of our biggest challenges over the last 12 to 13 years has been the reduction in police resourcing and the reductions in the National Police grants, linking down to local budgets. On a national level, recently we have engaged in the police uplift programme, which has seen 20,000 additional police officers recruited to get us back up to where we are or where we were in 2010 at the start of the reduction numbers there. So really positive in that sense. We've got a lot of new enthusiastic police officers coming into the organisation. In June of this year, the force will reach a landmark of exceeding our 2010 total police officer numbers. So I think that's a real positive going forward. Some of the other challenges that we've had, we've seen a significant increase in recorded crime over the last few years, particularly coming out of the pandemic. In total, Leeds year to date has seen a 7.6% increase in crime. A lot of those offences are seen around serial sexual offending, domestic abuse, but also in non-injury violence and a lot of online malicious communications type offences as well. The work of the police is absolutely part of the partnerships. I'm really pleased and agree with Councillor Cooper's comments at the front around us being one of the key partners in this. The partnership, in my view, is extremely strong and wouldn't operate if we didn't have those good links. Leeds is an extremely challenging district for policing. It's one of the biggest policing districts in the country. And bigger than a number of individual police forces as well. So I think we cannot underestimate the challenge. I think the report points to some really good progress going forward and over the last year and gives us a really good base to go into the new financial year with a real focus on what's important to our communities. And those priorities, just really quickly, are around, particularly for us, around vulnerability policing. So the policing of violence against women and girls is a major priority for us, as you will no doubt imagine. Dealing with youth violence is a continuing issue and a focus for us going forward, and will be a key part of the work into next year. But dealing then with community issues and engagement, both through the National Police Race Action Plan, which will be a focus of work across the district, but also as well a reinvestment and rebuilding of our neighbourhood policing strength and structure. Which brings me right back round to where I started my piece here around that uplift, and I am confident that I'll be able to provide some really positive news in the coming months around increasing resources in terms of frontline policing across Leeds. Just waiting for some clarification on that, but there should be a significant investment from the force into my local budget, which will then allow us to recruit those officers over the next 12 months to come into policing. I'll pause there, but thank you for the opportunity for coming today.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments, please? Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, Chief Superintendent Dodds, welcome to our exec board. I think you'd accept, wouldn't you, that on antisocial behaviour, despite figures showing a decrease in recorded incidents, most members of the public, and indeed numerous members of council, would say, well, that's not our experience, and that many of us are seeing in our own areas an increase in various forms of antisocial behaviour, moving up as far as carrying offensive weapons and intimidating other members of the public. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Carter. I think there's a couple of points to make here. Part of the reduction in the numbers of antisocial behaviour is the way in which we record and deal with some of those offences, and we are recording more public order based offences rather than antisocial behaviour offences. We deal with the issues that you raise around knife crime and violence related to that. We deal with under different recording criteria and offences. We've absolutely seen an increase in some of the incidents of use of knife crime, particularly in key areas of the city where our focus is. I think there's always an issue around communities around antisocial behaviour, what's perceived as antisocial behaviour, the impact on people, and I think that I would go back to the comments I made around the partnership, and the response to antisocial behaviour from a policing point of view is absolutely through our neighbourhood policing teams, and I've already talked about the reinvestment in them, but also as well it's around that partnership approach. The Leeds antisocial behaviour team have really good links and work very, very closely with ourselves in West Yorkshire Police and help to build that long-term problem-solving situation. I'm certainly not sat here today and would not do so in claiming that we have eradicated or significantly removed antisocial behaviour as a priority across the city. It absolutely is there. It's around getting that proportionate, appropriate, partnership-led response to get the best results for communities.
Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, if I can just add to what Steve's just said there, that I think that some of the reduction has to be recognised from the good practice that we've seen from LASBAT and from LASBAT officers. I know particularly in my own ward that I've seen a huge reduction in the number of ASB complaints. And that's down to local partnership working with LASBAT and the police and other partners to actually tackle the issue at hand, and not how that has nothing to do with how the police are recording it or not. It's actually brought about a reduction in terms of complaints around antisocial behaviour. So I think there might be an element around the different way of recording crime, but there's also an element that actually we must give some praise to the partnership from LASBAT and the police and others who are working in our city, doing some, extremely difficult work with members of the public and achieving some really good results for us. I mentioned my own ward because I know obviously so well the work that they've done there, but there are other examples that I talked about at my introduction, which was around the work up with the university and the way that they've been able to reduce the number of complaints around noise and complaints on that scale as well. So I just wanted to add that for context.
Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I don't doubt there's some excellent work going on. I'm not questioning that at all. But it just seems to me that the answer I got initially was really that you've changed the way of reporting. So the figures don't reflect what many of us are seeing happening in our own wards. Now, you can't be held responsible for changes in methods of reporting, although the police authority certainly can. But I think as ward members, we need an assurance that, and I think we've got that, but I'd like your comment anyway, that you're aware that by changing the method of reporting, some things are dropping off the edge, which ward members are being made very much aware of.
Paul, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think a lot has been said on this subject already. I just want to reassure Councillor Carter and anybody else really that antisocial behaviour as it's playing out in communities across Leeds, not unlike other conurbations, is a significant priority for us. There's a significant investment in terms of tackling the issues, both the issues that take place locally, and I'm aware of particular issues taking place in Councillor Carter's ward itself, but also the kind of strategic way we're looking at some of the issues. But give a good example would be the antisocial use of motor vehicles, for instance, and how that's really playing out everywhere. There are significant areas that are seeing more of this type of activity, but it's an issue for us across the city. And I think just in responding to Councillor Carter there's still more work that we're looking to do to respond to those issues. And there are some interventions that we're planning around the issue that I've just mentioned that hopefully should reassure about our continued focus on these issues, and that we're looking for innovative ways of supporting communities that in some instances are blighted by antisocial behaviour. It's still a very, very live issue for us. So it's very much a work in progress, but absolutely a priority.
Thank you. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just to follow up those queries about antisocial behaviour, neighbourhood policing, as was mentioned before, is an area which is the most appreciated by the taxpayer and the citizen. And I wanted to ask a question really about our neighbourhood policing teams and how they're structured, and what the effect might be on crime. So, between December 2021 and December 2022, apparently in the Leeds district, our neighbourhood crime, which is thefts, vehicle offences and burglary, etc., has gone up by 22%. So that's a fifth it's gone up in a year. At the same time, since 2015, the number of PCSOs in the Yorkshire and Humber region covered by 4 police forces has gone down by a third. In some forces, like South Yorkshire, it's gone down by about 60%. In the Humber, it's gone down by something like 50%. In North Yorkshire, it's gone down by around 6%, I think. And in West Yorkshire, it's gone down by 13.5%. That's up until 2022. This year's budget, its savings are all based in West Yorkshire on a vacancy factor for PCSOs. So that we're going to be at our lowest point since 2015 in terms of the number of PCSOs that are on our streets. Now, in this report, it talks about the secret for neighbourhood policing being based on intelligence-based policing. And I've been told by my permanent police officers on my neighbourhood policing team that the PCSOs are essential parts of that team in gathering that information on a neighbourhood level. So my question is, are you chasing the full-time police target numbers at the expense of the support staff underneath them on the streets? And is this a strategic policy, or is it just something that you think is a necessary cut to make right now?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think there's a couple of things that we probably need to just separate out here to understand where we are in policing terms. So I think the first point here is that nationally, the Police Uplift Programme is is in place. There is a requirement for forces to recruit police officers to the allocations and the numbers that are allocated to them, and that, in essence, is a non-negotiable. We've got to meet those targets. At the same time, there are also constraints on police budgets, both at a national level, also at a local level across the county, and we are being asked to find reductions within those as well. I would counter the point around PCSOs are being used and singled out as the method of finding those reductions. That isn't the case at all. The force is going through a massive program of priority-based budgeting to try and work out the most efficient and effective use of our resources. I think the other point as well to make is in relation to the figures quoted around crime and the comparison to previous years. We've come out of a pandemic. Absolutely, neighbourhood crime has seen an increase on the back of coming out of that lockdown. And certainly West Yorkshire Police and me as the Leeds District Commander are absolutely committed to neighbourhood policing. We have invested significantly in our safeguarding teams over the last 12 months and committed to get those up to 100% staffing because of the issues around vulnerability policing that I've mentioned. And as a result of that, some of our team strengths across other areas have been reduced to put officers into that very important role. As the new police officers and police recruits come into policing, we are starting to fill up teams that have carried vacancies over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. Neighbourhood policing is the absolute priority around that. In terms of PCSOs, it is my intention to maintain the level of PCSO deployment that I've got. I've got a budget to work to, and those numbers will continue. I see PCSOs as an absolute vital and important part of policing, and are very much the eyes and ears and information intelligence gatherers of policing across the district.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, and again, just to add a little bit of context, Councillor Galton seems to have done his homework there with some percentages. It's a pity you didn't mention the one figure that actually West Yorkshire Police have more PCSOs per head of population than most other districts of policing. And as Steve said, it's not just about the neighbourhood policing team who are in neighbourhoods, but it's also about the whole of the policing model that work on neighbourhood crime. And I think to single out PCSOs as being the one responsible for the increase is, I think you've sadly got that one wrong.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, is it?
3 more questions.
Yes, please.
Okay. Just on that last subject, I'm sure I've no need to remind you that the precept for the police authority, the amount people pay, is going up substantially in this coming year. We've all agreed to that. This mayor was made put under some pressure, I understand, at the precept setting meeting to give some commitments, some value for money, for the extra money that the council taxpayers would be paying. And that included beefing up neighbourhood policing teams, which she has committed to. Is that commitment going to be met? Secondly, and on a completely different issue, the police authority participate in the safeguarding boards for both adults and children, and they participate in those boards at Leeds. Are you happy that the safeguarding boards are as rigorous as they need to be and pass complaints up the chain when they really need to be, whether it's violence, a risk to young people, or indeed for elderly people or people who come under adult social care? And the third question, very quickly, It relates to the Leeds Festival. Just want some assurances there. I have been briefed on last year's festival, and I would like some assurance that the police are taking very seriously the alleged shortcomings there might have been on safety issues at the Leeds Festival.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a comment on all of those, although the agenda item today was the community safety annual report. So if I can, in terms of the Leeds Festival, the police will put a gold, silver, bronze command structure around that, and we'll work very closely with our partners and the organisers to make sure that that event is run in line with national policing operations and public safety requirements. And yes, the challenge will go back in around the organisation and the running of that event. In terms of the arrangements around safeguarding, I am comfortable and confident that we have the structures in place and that we're working with our partners to work through any issues that come in the city. There has been a significant investment of time, both from the police and our partners, around reviewing those structures and very much working to make those as effective and supportive as they can for victims across the city. In terms of the resourcing plan, I mean, the points for the points around the mayor and the challenges are probably something to ask and ask her to clarify on. But in terms of neighbourhood policing, from my own point of view as the Leeds District Commander, it is an absolute priority for me. It is a key part of my district structure. I spoke at the beginning around increases in police resourcing. I cannot give you those numbers today because I haven't been given them yet. It's still something for consideration in terms of what comes in. But a portion of that resource, when it comes to me, will be going into neighbourhood policing. My priority at the moment around resourcing and staffing is around building my neighbourhood policing teams back up to strength. And within the last month, I've got to a point now where, in terms of my inspectors, I have 6 permanent inspectors in place for each of the 6 neighbourhood policing teams. I have 36 sergeants in post, which is my full complement now. And I am currently running at around 85% police officers in those teams. And as I get more and more officers coming in through the recruitment process, they are going into there and getting us up to 100%. If the resourcing that I'm anticipating comes, then I will be looking to increase those numbers further, in line with your question as well. And I'm also looking to try and maintain the numbers of PCSOs that I've got, notwithstanding that we do get staff turnover, we do get people leaving from time to time.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please, to sum this item up.
Thank you, Leader. And I think just to offer some reassurance there to both Councillor Galton and Councillor Carter about the continued commitment to work in partnership with the police and the many other partners that we work with at Safer Leeds Executive is absolutely from us. You've heard from Stephen, you've also heard from myself about the commitment around neighbourhood policing and the way that we can achieve better results for that when we work in partnerships at a locality level, which is what we're doing and what we're also committed to doing. I think the point that you made around Leeds Festival, I know there has been a lot of multi-agency meetings this year following the sad death of an individual at last year's Leeds Festival, to see how things may well be improved from a safety level. And those meetings are still ongoing. They include Festival Republic, who are all keen to ensure that we get the right model in place for this year's Leeds Festival. And I do know that involvement is cross-party across with licensing as well. So I'd really like to thank Steve for coming to the board today, for answering questions that maybe have been outside the Safer Leeds report that we've had today. And just a gentle reminder, Councillor Carter, we rely on our government to fund our police properly. This is work that we do in partnership together through the council and through others to add value to that. But unfortunately, the government need to step up to the plate in terms of funding our policing and other public bodies properly. And that's not being done at the moment. But thanks, Steve, very much for coming.
I will, before I turn to recommendations, I'll add my thanks to Chief Superintendent Dodds for coming today, and thank you for the work. And I think on behalf of all of us, our thanks to all your officers in your team working in our neighbourhoods right across the city. I will turn to the recommendations on page 83, and I take that everybody in the board accepts those recommendations, and we'll move on to item 8, please, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Leader. And this item is about the core business transformation part 2. So the core business transformation programme is working to improve and transform the council's finance, HR, payroll and procurement activities. And we really want to make it easier and quicker to get our business done internally by implementing modern, efficient digital services which enable financial savings to be made and improve the well-being of our colleagues by removing the stress of inefficient and out-of-date systems. These are systems used by council staff on activities such as paying staff, job search, recruitment selection, booking annual leave, requesting training, appraisals, recording sickness absence, and so on. The report seeks approval to proceed with phase 2. Executive board already approved phase 1, which was on the financial improvements to be made through the core business transformation. And this is phase 2, and it seeks approval to spend £8 million funded through capital receipts for the procurement and implementation of this new system. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Any questions or comments? Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, it's very expensive, but necessary, I think. Part of a project's going to cost £8 million. It's a lot of money to get our electronic systems to talk to each other. £8 million for an electronic conversation, it appears to me. But it has to be done because when 6,000 members of our staff don't have access to all the council systems, then it needs rectifying, and the cost is significant. I am concerned that originally we all were concerned that the system providers would not have the capacity to deliver what we wanted. But it now appears that it's the council that may, in fact, be providing the roadblock. I'd like some assurances on that, please.
Who would like to come in on this? Neil, please.
Yeah, I don't think see it like that. I mean, clearly this is something which is going to affect all members of staff. So sometimes you can put in systems, and unless they're properly used, they're not fully exploited. So there's going to be a lot of work to do with staff ourselves. So it's not just about a technology solution, but that will be very much part of the project. And we are part of the cost of this is also getting advice on actually how we do that implementation to make sure that what we bring in is truly effective.
You, Councillor Golden, please.
Thanks, Chair. I also support the paper and share the sentiments that it's a lot of money, but it's well worth it if it delivers the solutions that it promises. One of my concerns is we have had recently a quite high profile example of a local authority being targeted with a cyber attack. That was Redcar and Cleveland Council, and I think they've recently been giving evidence to the Select Committee at Parliament on this subject. It ended up costing them, I believe, 11.4 million to rectify the damage that was done by that attack. So 8 million for an authority the size of ours is actually sounds like a good forward plan of investment, as long as we can guarantee that what we are bringing in is the top end in terms of fighting that cyber attack. So some assurance would be very welcome.
I think it's fair to say we're targeted by cyber attacks all the time. I mean, the issue is, are they successful in what the attackers want to do in terms of disabling systems, which is why you're quite right, Councillor Galton. You know, sometimes to avoid the negative consequences for councils that have been affected, why sometimes we need to spend the money, because just because we don't have the negative implications doesn't mean that we're not being targeted all the time. Neil, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, a couple of things on this. I mean, sadly, the presence of cyber attack does mean that actually replacement of systems on a regular basis is an inevitability now, rather than something which one can choose to do. So we used to do something called sweat the asset, try to keep things going rather than spend money on these things. But actually, when they represent a security risk, that actually is clearly a false economy. And in both these cases around payroll and the HR systems, they are going to go out of support, with the recruitment one going out of support next year. So inevitably we have to do something. We have to be very conscious of making sure that we are absolutely up to date and keeping all the patches going and so forth. But actually the way that we're going with the finance work is working with Microsoft, and in working with such a big supplier, you also then have some guarantees around the quality of the security that you can get from that sort of firm. Clearly, we also put a lot of attention to it internally as well and have a very good record on it.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 120, and I take it from the comments everybody accepts those recommendations. It's great. Could we move on to item 9, please, Councillor Cooper?
Thanks, Leader. And item 9 is the capital receipts programme update. We've been bringing an update on a regular basis annually to Executive Board to keep members of the board informed on the progress of the capital receipts programme, and this year's one, you'll find the detail in Appendix A and also in the confidential appendix, which we'll be able to discuss at the end of Executive Board, which outlines the investment that we've already received through this programme, and also it gives an updated list of the capital receipts that are there for disposal as well. I'll leave it there for now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Are there any comments on this paper, please? That's great. So I shall turn to the recommendations on page 171 and 172. Martin, please.
Yes. Sorry, Chair. I just need to, for accuracy's sake, point out there is a typing error on Otley Lido where there's a footnote against it which shouldn't be there. So the position on Otley Lido is as reported in the capital receipts programme last year. Just for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. A stray footnote. Thank you, Martin, for that. And with that amendment, again, I see support for the recommendation page 171, 172, and we've got the pink paper for discussion in a confidential item. With that, I'll move on to item 10, please, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Leader, and my last paper for today, and it is chapter 9 of the financial monitoring report that comes to Executive Board each time. I'd like to report that the projected overspend has improved by £2 million from December's report, and it's now at £13.4 million. We intend that any overspend will be funded from the strategic contingency reserve balances. So we do intend to bring in a balanced budget at the end of it. The report gives the detail of where the overspend is in that, and as ever, often the reasons are due to the inflationary pressures that we are experiencing through energy, fuel, and the pay award as well. So I'll leave that there for Chair now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Any questions on this paper? Councillor Carter, please.
not at length we are where we are. I just know that you'll be using, let's say, as far as I can make out, £14 million of the strategic reserve due to the overspend in children's services, which will mean that the strategic contingency reserve going forward is reduced to a very low level indeed, and would not be able in the coming financial year to come to the aid of children's services or anybody else in such a way. And I would like some assurance that in the budget preparing process, we are properly conscious of that possible iceberg. And I know you've had a task and finish group in children's services, and I know they've come up with some savings, and we'll talk more about that at the budget meeting of council. Also, the 2 million better off position, is that because of the savings on what we projected would be the gas prices, or is that another saving?
Richard Ellis, please.
The improvement, Councillor Carter, is down to the savings on the debt budget. In terms of these two items there, one, we're now reflecting the slippage in the capital programme that's as sort of detailed in this report. And that means there's a lower requirement for borrowing, and that reduces our borrowing costs. But secondly, we've also reviewed the MRP calculation and recalculated that, and combined that improves the position in terms of debt budget for a reduced level of spend by circa about £3.5 million.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I'll turn to the recommendations on page 192, and I take it everybody is happy with those recommendations. It's great. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And we're going back now to adults, children, social care and health partnerships, and Councillor Venner's and item 6, please, Councillor Venner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to welcome Richard Jones, who's just joining us at the table. Richard's the independent chair for the Safeguarding Adults Board. So I'm just going to make some really brief introductory comments on the annual report of the Leeds Safeguarding Adults Board, and then I'll hand over to Richard. So this year we focused on the board fairly extensively, as is reflected in the report, on making safeguarding and the language of safeguarding accessible to the diverse communities of Leeds. And we've done that through things like we had a workshop just before Christmas with a number of grassroots community organisations that particularly support people from Black and minority ethnic communities. So members got to hear very directly about people's lived experiences of safeguarding from those communities. There's also a really fantastic partnership with Advonet, the advocacy charity in Leeds, particularly around supporting people with learning disabilities. So Talk to Me, Hear My Voice, Hear My Safeguarding Story is a strong theme which permeates all the work of the board. We've also been focusing extensively on self-neglect, and that's following some reviews of serious incidents where self-neglect was a feature. So we have a self-neglect strategy that we've just launched for the city, which is very wide-reaching. It's a cross-council strategy, but also brings in partners from outside the council. So, for example, housing have been very involved in that, because often housing workers might be the only people crossing the threshold and going into someone's home. So it's really important that self-neglect doesn't only sit with social care, but is seen as a responsibility of the wider council and also our partners. So that's an example of a piece of work that we've been undertaking. But I'll leave it there, Chair, and I'll hand over to Richard, because it's not my report really, it's the report of the 3 statutory safeguarding partners. So I'll hand over to Richard as the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Venner, and thank you, Chair. So it's really good to be back here again for this annual report, and I think it's great that Leeds wants to create space in and among all the other kind of challenges that you have to just focus briefly on those most vulnerable citizens in our communities. So what you have before you is our annual report for 21-22. That sounds a long time ago now, doesn't it? An update report for the work we're doing this year. And then also a peer review undertaken back in April of last year, which has informed some of the work we're doing. I just want to say very briefly 2 or 3 things. One is we are still probably, as a partnership, emerging, and certainly our report for 21-22 sees that process of emerging from the pandemic and lockdown. And I think there are a whole set of issues that we need to really explicitly work through, both for ourselves as partner agencies, but also for citizens and communities in terms of how we are now working. I think it's also a report that we're presenting in the context of really significant challenges for frontline staff right across the city and for our key partners in the third and community voluntary sector. And also, obviously, as you're aware, with your councillor hats on in your wards, for communities, for families and for individuals, given the challenges around cost of living. And what we do know clearly is that in the face of those challenges, it's often the most vulnerable who have the biggest hill to climb. So just quickly, a comment about activity levels. So what we've seen over the last sort of 5 or 6 years in Leeds is an increasing level of concerns being raised across partners, third community voluntary sector partners too, to the safeguarding process. And I think that is a really positive thing. It maps the trend nationally, although I think our level of concerns grew by about 11%, which is in excess of the national picture, which is about 8%. And those concerns at times will then trigger what's called a Section 42 inquiry, an investigation, if you like, of the circumstances and the issues and the risks. And we've seen a similar level of activity in that area, again, against the national picture, which has gone slightly up. The biggest area of concern focuses on issues around self-neglect and acts of omission. And that makes up nearly, well over a third of the concerns that are raised by people within the city. And I think the final thing I'd say just on activity is that if you look at outcomes, and that's really what we've got to be driven by, what is the difference we're making to vulnerable people? Well, nearly 9 in 10 people will report or will be reported through a trusted friend or a local trusted organisation that they have seen a reduction or the elimination of the risks and the concerns that they came with into a safeguarding process. We are working with 4 key objectives which have been developed with citizens and partners. One is, and the key one is that we're citizen-led. And I'm really proud about the work that we've done, that Councillor Venner touched on, the listening that we're doing to community organisations and the response we're wanting to make to ensure that we absolutely are centred on what makes the difference for people and for families. We continue with an objective around improving awareness across all our communities. And again, Councillor Venner mentioned the work we've been doing with Voluntary Action Leeds, and the fact that we've now, and I think I've mentioned this once before, been able to reach into and start a conversation with the Chinese community in the city. Our third objective is around embedding citywide approaches, and the focus this year has been on self-neglect and the strategy that we're now working with. And the report talks about the work we're doing around providing opportunities for people to bring cases that really, and individuals that really stretch the systems into what we call an exceptional risk forum. And the final objective for us is to learn from our experience and from what people have experienced in terms of their own lives. And we've undertaken a number of safeguarding adult referrals, including a thematic around self-neglect. And what we know as we start to think about our plans for next year is that issues around capacity, mental capacity, issues around alcohol and drug misuse, issues around multi-agency working, hate crime, and fire safety will be core to what it is as a partnership we want to do. And finally, Chair, very quickly, I just wanted to, as your independent chair, to thank my board colleagues. All of us are only as good as the people around us. So I'm really appreciative of the partnership work that goes on across the city, the work of individuals who champion key elements of our programme, and for frontline staff, whether they be in the voluntary or the statutory sector, for their ongoing ability to rise to the challenge that individuals and communities face. And a final comment from me is to Kath, to thank her as the Director of Adult Services, Director of Adults and Health, for your leadership, your contribution, your challenge and your passion, because that's what we need. We need people in leadership roles who are passionate about making a difference. And I'll leave it there, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Richard. I think we'll all add our thanks to you and your colleagues for the work. Are there any questions on this report, please? Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, thanks, Richard. And I'm sure you and your board are doing a very thorough job, but there's, I've been taking a specific interest in safeguarding at all levels of late. And I would like to ask a particular question about safeguarding adult reviews, and particularly about the composition of your board, and more particularly the board when it reviews a serious safeguarding issue. There are no politicians involved with that, are there? It is a decision for partners to make as to whether there should be a referral up the chain, because I know that there were two cases where you did discuss whether the cases should be moved up the chain into a further, more serious review. So I'd like those assurances, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carter. So we have a duty. Safeguarding adult boards have only really three kind of accountabilities and duties, statutory responsibilities, but one is to undertake safeguarding adult reviews, where three criteria need to be met. One is that there's been significant injury or a death that's resulted as a result of a safeguarding issues. B, that we've got evidence that can back that up, and thirdly that there's a failure or indication of a failure in terms of multi-agency working. So the way in which we manage that process is that we encourage all partners across the city, and that's not just statutory partners, to raise concerns or referrals to the board when they feel that they've been working with a case that might meet those criteria. Sometimes actually what they bring are cases that demonstrate actually there might well be some interface working within the NHS that needs to be sorted, rather than a whole system problem about how all partners are working together. And then we as a board, and we have a subgroup that undertakes this responsibility for us, and you're right, it doesn't involve elected members. Councillor Venner is very helpfully a member of our board and brings the perspective as an elected member and with her executive role too. But that's a subgroup that has a senior police officer, a senior member of the colleagues in the NHS, it has a senior member from Adults and Health, and myself as a chair. And what we do is we decide whether or not we feel the concern that's been raised should actually move to the next step. And the next step is to gain and gather all the possible information we can about the case. And we then come back, once we've got all that information, to making a decision as to whether or not we feel the criteria are met for a safeguarding adult review. Sometimes they are, as you mentioned in the report, there were two when we didn't feel that was the case, but would encourage agencies to go away and progress individual agency learning. And if that's the case, we'll commission an independent person to undertake that review on our behalf. And that will then come back to the board for agreement and for ensuring that the learning that's generated from it makes a difference in practice.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Carter, please.
So you can come to a decision on a particular case, but you still have to refer your findings to the board on which there are politicians before a decision is taken. Or can you, as a subgroup, refer the matter up the chain?
Yeah, yes. In a sense, up the chain is the board. We don't go. That's the board ultimately holds the responsibility and the accountability for making a decision as to whether or not a safeguarding adult review should be undertaken. So what the subgroup does, it doesn't have the decision to undertake a review. What it is able to do is to ensure that we gather the information, we do the scoping piece, and then we go back to the board once all that information has been available with a recommendation as to whether or not we feel we should progress a safeguarding adult review or we shouldn't. And then that is a whole board decision involving all the partners that sit around that board table. Councillor Carter, I hope that's clear. Yeah.
Thank you. Tom, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess one way that to address Councillor Carter's question moving forward is that there could be it could be made clear where recommendations have been made and where they've been accepted or not in terms of an annual report. I was just going to make a comment about just to thank Richard and the team for the work that's gone on this year and the very strong partnership working that's taking place, and not in a in what you might call a passive partnership, but I think it's a very active partnership. There's strong challenge on all sides, and it's a very challenging environment for all the partners to be working in, given the strains and the stresses that we've seen in the health and care system. So this is a really, really fundamental piece of work, and it's, if you like, part of a wider system that, as we know, has been under great challenge over the last last couple of years. I also wanted to commend the work on equality and diversity, and hope that continues into the future. And I think it's critical in a city like ours that we have that sort of fine grain, and not all with the big national systems that we're often dealing with, and national policies in a big city like ours with big organisations like ours. That person-centred approach and ability to adapt to different communities' needs is not always something that happens naturally. So I think it's a really important part of our work going forward. And then finally, I just wanted to add my thanks to Kath on the record from the officers of the council for what a fantastic job that she's done for us.
Thank you, Tom. I don't see anybody else wanting to comment on this report, so I'll move to the recommendations on page 23 and 24. And I take it everybody's happy with those recommendations, and thank you for coming along, Richard. We appreciate your time. Moving on the agenda now, we're going to my portfolio, the leaders' portfolio. The first item, 11, is in three parts, which is the budget papers to refer to full council. Normally, we save our discussion list to full council, so I take it we're happy to move those on to full council in three parts to three recommendations. That's great. Thanks, everybody. And of course,
we're including treasury management. I wanted to say something. Perhaps 11C.
of course. So,
Yep. Which is just to thank the officers in treasury management yet again for
Thank you, Councillor Carter. So just for clarity on the three reports under item 11, Councillor Carter and Councillor Galton are reserving. Oh, Richard, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just update you in terms of the budget in front of you was based on the provisional local government finance settlement, which came out on the 19th of December. Subsequent to that, this week and after publication of this document, we got the final local government finance settlement, which was consistent with the assumptions in here, albeit on two particular areas. Firstly, with regard to the services grant, in terms of after an allocation of a sort of a contingency for the final settlement from government, is the council will be in receipt of a further £253,000 in 23-24, and the intention is that is contributing towards the strategic contingency reserve. Secondly, in terms of the surplus on the business rates levy account, this is for tariff authorities to fund contingency against sort of the funding the sort of safety net. The surplus on that has been allocated to local authorities, and Leeds will receive £1.3 million. That will be receivable in the current financial year, and clearly will help with that overspend that we reflected on the previous paper, and the next financial health report to this board will reflect that in the figures. And then secondly, can I take in Martin's example of fessing up in terms of the report that we've got, just in terms of on section 3, page 241, in terms of the budget gaps that we have for 24-25 and 25-26. Those gaps should be £43 million and £28.7 million respectively, not 48 and 26.7. And that detail is correct within the appendix 1. It's just on the cover report. So it could be noted for the minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Does anybody else want to comment? Okay, I'll have a third go at moving the recommendations on item 11 and noting Councillor Galton and Councillor Carter are reserving their position on the budget items. And we'll move on to item 12, which is the initial action plan from our local government corporate peer challenge, which took place last November. The paper sets out our step forward. There's a useful diagram that shows the timeline moving forward about how we will take forward our response to the peer review. I think we were all very pleased with the conclusions it drew, but recognise there are areas that it brought to our attention where further work was needed. So this report sets out the future actions, and that this that the action plan will also be going to the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board as well in the future steps. So with that, I take it everybody is happy with the recommendations on page 611, 612. So we'll move on to item 13, and we're on to Councillor Hayden's papers, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So item number 13 is the initial public consultation on the proposed scope of Leeds Local Plan 2040. So this is a scoping document on the second local plan update, updating policies not included in local plan update 1, which is known as Your City, Your Neighbourhood, Your Planet. So this is the Leeds Local Plan 2040. This consultation marks the start of the engagement stage of the Leeds Local Plan 2040 and helps decide what should be included within the scope of the update. Consultation will run between the 10th of February 2023 and the 24th of March 2023. So I'll leave it there, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Carter, please.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's a consultation paper. All I want is an assurance that we will widely consult and that we will monitor carefully the volume of responses and take appropriate action as we go along if we are not getting the level of consultation responses we ought to be seeing on what will be an extremely important and serious piece of work going forward that members of the public should be kept informed of as much as is humanly possible.
Thank you, Councillor Carter.
You have that assurance from me. This is the initial scoping consultation, but I'd like to bring in Martin Elliott to answer any specific questions on that.
Thanks. Martin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carter. Just to bring Executive Board up to date with our statement of community involvement, which was adopted last year. That sets out for the first time for the council, and actually unusually for a local authority, specific indicators around gathering views of people. And 3 of those indicators are relevant. The first is to get a response from all communities across Leeds. The second is to get a response, particularly from harder to reach communities and harder to reach groups. And the third is to get responses and engage with younger people. So we'll be keeping a close eye on those indicators as we progress.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. As Councillor Carter said, it's a huge piece of work, and it takes several years to get to the point where we can actually start using the time that's been invested in it in terms of a final document. I am encouraged by the open description of all those areas that are going to be taken into consideration in each of the different subject matters in the paper. Although I was a little concerned because on paragraph 4, where it says role of centres, it was quite badly written. So it meant that you didn't know exactly what the sentiment was for the role of town and district centres going forward. And it seemed to focus most necessarily on commercial and business use, as opposed to the potential of our town and district centres and the way that they've changed in terms of being social hubs and deliverers of health and well-being outcomes, not just about shops and houses. So I look forward to that being clarified and developed further.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. Sounds like our first consultation response. Well done, Gold Star. Who, Martin, Councillor Hayden, would like to come back on this before I turn to the recommendations?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Galton. It certainly isn't an intention to restrict the uses within town centres. We need to think about their role moving forward, and certainly welcome sort of a focus on cultural and social activities within our local and town centres. So we'll make sure that we flag that up as we move through the consultation.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you. Just to reiterate that this is a scoping document. This is not so of what will go into the consultation, which, as you quite rightly says, will take a considerable amount of time and then a few years before we get to the finished document. So there'll be plenty of scope, and there's nothing there in that paragraph to restrict anything, because what we're inviting is people to feed into this scoping document to tell us what they want to be consulted on further.
Great. With that, I'm going to turn to the recommendations on pages 621, 622, and I see the board is happy with those, and we'll move on to item 14, please, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the Connecting Leeds Transport Strategy Action Plan Annual Update, and covers the year 2022. It sets out our progress and success against all the key measures, but it still recognises that there is much more to do in order to achieve our carbon reduction objectives by 2030, which is our target. So there's lots going on. There's still lots to do. However, I do want to note that funding remains uncertain. There's a high reliance on variable government grants and competitive bidding processes, which doesn't lend itself to long-term planning and to achieving those aims that we have, those ambitious aims that we have in a timely way. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Are there any questions?
Well, again, it seems. Sorry, I'll turn the.
Councillor Carter, please.
Yeah. Again, it's. We're setting out where we are with a number of schemes, but I would like some additional work doing, and I entirely accept the carbon reduction, the need for carbon reduction, and the targets. But I have to say, I do wonder what the effect of a lot of schemes going on at once. Sometimes to the man in the street, there seems to be no rhyme nor reason to them joining up in a sensible way, and what effect that is having on carbon now because of unnecessary hold-ups in traffic, and the fact that whether you like it or not, most of the buses are only partially full, and what effect it's having on the economy of the city. And we must be able to, through the development department, be able to look at the situation of the businesses that rely upon footfall in the city centre.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Martin, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, in terms of footfall, Councillor Carter, footfall in 23 has actually increased quite significantly to date. So that is really encouraging in terms of the numbers that are coming through. No, it is, and also that's being confirmed by the retailers as well in the city centre, who are confirming a significant uplift on where it was. With regard to the planning, I think there's two aspects there. One is I think picking up on what Councillor Hayden said by way of introduction, that I think we would prefer a longer term settlement from government, so that because we all know that central government departments don't like underspends, and so we have the challenge of having to spend the money within the time frame within which it is given. We then also do a lot of work in terms of making sure that, notwithstanding that last point, the work is planned in as good a way as we can, and we have regards to the interdependencies of different works. But what we can't allow for is some of those things that are outside of our control, such as rail strikes, such as emergency works on the highway that utility providers have to bring forward, and that does create a challenge for us.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Pryor, please.
Just on the specific points around footfall, I've got some of the figures that Martin alluded to. So compared to the same days last year, footfall in the city centre is anywhere between 16 and 50% up compared to last year, and it's almost back at 2019 levels. Yesterday, in fact, was down pre-COVID by 0.4%.
I think it's worth, as we're all sharing our figures that we have in our, we had some figures reported at the Combined Authority that bus patronage is nearly 90% of what it was pre-COVID, which given some of the, given, some of the standards of bus services that some of us, particularly in the outer areas, are experiencing from the private bus companies, I think I found a remarkable figure. And also for, again, given where the state of the railways at the moment, I think it was October and November actually saw more passengers coming through Leeds station than October, November 2019 in terms of the number of people travelling. And certainly my experience of not being able to get on the train at Garforth station because it arrived full will perhaps add to that. But so certainly there is it might be different patterns of travel, but certainly the number of people travelling and the number of people in the city centre is back to, if not above, COVID levels. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't sure if I'd missed it somewhere, but there is reference to 20-minute neighbourhoods in terms of them being a positive concept that the council is interested in. Can you demonstrate in this plan what you're going to do to implement 20-minute neighbourhoods within neighbourhoods?
I think you're referring to local plan update 1, which talks about is being consulted on over the last few months, and that's not this document. This document is the Leeds Transport Strategy Action Plan annual update and what we've been doing. Yeah, so 20-minute neighbourhoods are being consulted on in local plan update 1, your planet, your city, your life, those things, and not in this document here.
Councillor Galton, help us out here, please.
Yes, well, hopefully. I assumed you had joined up thinking in the council and that one strategy document would speak to another strategy document. And if you were interested in 20-minute neighbourhoods, you don't need to go out to consultation to discuss what is it. You need to have some idea about how you might want to implement it as part of your transport plan, instead of just thinking of it as some kind of asset investment strategy.
Can I come back?
Yes, please, Councillor
Thank you
Hayden.
very much. I do
Add
love
some clarity, please.
Yeah, quite lightly. Would you like me to use my teacher voice? Right. So this, they do talk to each other. That's why I love my portfolio, because they all talk to each other. 20-minute neighbourhood is a concept. It's a very positive concept where you live, you should be able to access everything you need within 20 minutes walk. So that's doctors, schools, shops, libraries, everything like that. It's not necessarily a transport strategy. It is mainly a planning strategy that we create those neighbourhoods that create constructive and community-based neighbourhoods where people can live, play and work around their home if they want to, but they are allowed out and they are allowed to visit other neighbourhoods and they are allowed to the city centre, which we very much encourage. Now, where transport speaks to that policy is making it easier for people to cycle and walk and not get, you know, maimed on the roads and not have to use their car, although, you know, the car is needed for certain journeys. And that's why all this transport work is going into in terms of public transport, cycling and walking, and making it our neighbourhoods much more pleasant places to live, work and play. But I can bring in Gary to talk about that a little bit more. Thank you.
Please, Gary.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Just to expand on what Councillor Hayden's just said there, in the version of this report next year, I would expect to see further details around this particular area of work. There've been ongoing discussions with Councillor Hayden and Councillor Carlill about healthier streets and how we might roll out some of the concepts that are being talked about here. And so I would expect this annual plan next year to cover that off. So watch this space.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, not on this, because I think Councillor Hayden described it perfectly from my point of view. I was just gonna make the point that in relation to the footfall stuff that I think is relevant to everybody. We are actually bucking the trend in relation to many in relation particularly to London. So the Leeds transport system and the footfall is increasing faster. And this is something that I think we need to, all of us, repeatedly make as a point to policymakers who are based in central London, that although they may be experiencing a slower recovery, if you like, to return to the office and commuting, that isn't taking place in Leeds. And so that has relevance for investment that we need into the transport system more generally. So I just wanted to make that point, that we are relatively in quite a good position as well.
Thank you, Tom. I want to turn to the recommendations on page 845, and I take it everybody's happy with those recommendations. And we now move on to item 15, please, Helen.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the Connecting Leeds Public Transport Investment Programme completion update. So this, as board members will remember, this started in April 2017 and includes an update on the full programme, majority completion on site in November 2022. So we're talking about the successful delivery in a very short time frame, which Martin alluded to earlier. I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has been involved over the last 6 years. It's been a tremendous success, an award-winning example of excellent partnership working led by Leeds City Council. And I just want to thank everybody involved. From the Cookridge Street, which became a fabulous piece of public realm, but started off as a bus priority scheme, to the hedgerow with its wide pavements and 40 trees, to New Briggate with its, again, lovely aspect where people can sit out at the restaurants and leave the Grand Theatre into wide pavements and not get knocked over, to the Corn Exchange, which really makes that beautiful Grade 1 building pop now because the bus stops and things have gone, again with new trees and biodiversity and planting, and so much more people friendly. So if you go in an arc from Millennium Square right down to the Corn Exchange, along the hedgerow and down there, and then it will give us, and I just want to thank the people of Leeds as well for their patience when that work was being completed, and the fact that, again, that partnership working, that we were able to lay the district heating pipes at the same time as reconfiguring the hedgerow. So therefore we weren't digging up the road numerous times. And that took a lot of consideration and thinking and legal processes, but was done really, really well. So just a huge thank you. And it just shows that we in Leeds can deliver and deliver well. And I look forward to the government recognising that with extra funding in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Are there any questions on this paper? Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm wanting to know what fact checking went into this paper, because I'm looking at item 5. And it says this programme has successfully delivered a wide range of interventions throughout Leeds. Highlights from those delivered schemes include, and then there's a whole load of bullet points. Well, apparently in Rothwell, I've had improvements to my neighbourhood transport hub, which we don't have. And there's also a reference to one being improved in Robin Hood, which it doesn't have. And actually, those are both associated with transforming city schemes, which I think might be being mentioned in the first bullet point, which talks about investment in 5 key transport corridors. But thanks to the inflation review, which was signed off by you, both of those schemes have had millions taken out of them. So, for instance, the one that's going through my patch, which is the A639 scheme, has had £7 million taken off it so that it can be spent on the city centre schemes, which are overheating and costing more than you expected. So actually, have you delivered all of those bullet points that you mentioned there? Because I know for a fact that one of them hasn't been delivered, and I think 2 of them might not have been delivered.
Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for jumping in too quickly there. I will bring Gary in with the details, but the corridor scheme that you're referring to is one with Wakefield, and there were inflationary pressures. It wasn't just me that signed that off, because it was with Wakefield and West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and the Mayor, Tracy Braben, and I'm not blaming her. It was done in consultation, and it was a West Yorkshire-wide decision over a number of schemes. I will be corrected if wrong, but the money saved did not go to the city centre. Oh, right. Well, you've asked for a fact check.
Sorry, can we have one member speaking at once, please? I hate to be old-fashioned around this one. No, it wasn't you interrupting, Councillor Hayden. Gary, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair.
I'll probably have to come back on the Rosswell and Robin Hood one. I know, generally speaking, as the report outlines, there was money moving from various budget headings, but obviously the point that Councillor Galton is making is that works just did not take place in Rosswell at all. So I will just need to double check that. And if that's an error in the report, then obviously we apologise for that. But as I say, some money was moved around from various budgets to allow progress to be made. In terms of the A639 scheme, yes, that was part of the inflation review where we were required by WICA to identify £50 million worth of cuts. The latest information I have is that all schemes, all proposals will now go to the outline business case stage. And at that point, so for that particular scheme, the £7 million elements will go to the OBC stage. And then there will be a further review at WICA across the whole programme to see if other schemes have progressed or not, to see whether we need to go with the £7 million scheme or the identified reduced scheme. But that's the latest information I have, is that they've moved it now to that position. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I'll confirm what Gary said. The intention of the review isn't to stop schemes completely, but given the inflation that sorry, I'm speaking at the moment, Stuart, thank you. So given the it's just common courtesy, Councillor Carter. So given the inflation that has happened in the last year with the government losing control of the economy, these schemes we intend to continue with. There's a small number that may not go ahead as travel patterns have changed around COVID, but the intention is to continue work on developing them, and when they can be funded appropriately and at affordable level, will go ahead. Councillor Carter, please.
Am I allowed? Excellent. Councillor Hayden. I'm reluctant to defend Councillor Galton, but you sent out the list of schemes. The email came in your name that were being suggested to WICA from the Leeds pot that would have to have the funding reduced or cut back altogether. It came from you. Now, I'm used to you blaming everybody under the sun, usually the government, for everything. But when you start blaming the mayor, there's plenty to blame her for, get it right. You sent the suggestions to her.
Councillor Hayden, please.
Councillor Carter, of course I did, because I was asked to. We were asked to review because inflation's at such a rampant level that we haven't got the money in the pot. So we had to review. I'm from Leeds, and all across West Yorkshire, we were asked to review our schemes. And that's my role, and that's my job, and that's exactly what I did. I am taking responsibility. Councillor Galton said what I signed off. No, I didn't sign it off. I said, these are the schemes that we are having problems financing, and these are our suggestions to reduce the costing of, because of inflation's at 10% and even more in the construction world. So we were asked a question. I suggested this list along with Gary, which we were asked to do. It was shared with your good selves. And then it went to WICA to be put in the over, and then we'll go to outline business case for what's decided what we can afford and what we can't afford. It has not been allocated anywhere else as yet, as Gary has just outlined. I did not sign this off. It's not within my power to sign off what is going to be reduced and what hasn't. I was asked for suggestions, and they were my suggestions that I was advised of. That was the process.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well, looking at that inflation review document that was sent to us, it clearly states that there's 4.5 million being taken off the A639 scheme to leave it with £1 million.
Sorry, Councillor Galton, are you referring to the paper in front of us?
I'm referring to the inflation review.
Well, I don't believe every member of the board has that document, so I don't think we can be discussing it at the moment.
Oh, okay. Right, okay.
Oh.
So we won't discuss how much was taken from one scheme and then given to another scheme, which is in the city centre.
Well, like I say, we can't discuss a document that not every member of the board has. It's only
Okay.
fair
I'll leave it
to
at that then,
membership of the
Chair.
board. Thank you, Councillor Golden. I'm going to turn to the recommendations on this report on page. I'm not laughing, Councillor Carter. I'm turning to the recommendations on page 887 of this report, and do everybody accept those? I take it everybody does. So we'll go move on to Councillor Harlan's papers and item 16, please.
Thank you, Chair. Follow that. So this report presents our refreshed and enhanced approach to equality, diversity and inclusion, including a vision statement and action plan developed to move us up a gear on this agenda. It reflects an increasing awareness in society around equality. The last decade has seen this city and a country face a range of challenges, from austerity to Brexit, COVID to the current cost of living crisis. And the impact of this has often been felt most by those communities already marginalised. The city is also getting increasingly diverse, as seen by the early returns from the last year's census. And citizens' expectations on this agenda are increasing. 13 years since the Equality Act 2010 was passed, people are expecting more and faster progress to address and remove discrimination to ensure everyone in society has the same opportunities to thrive. Our legal duties under the Equality Act 2010 are to eliminate unlawful discrimination, advance equality of opportunity, and foster good relations between those who share a protected characteristic and those who don't. But we believe we have a leadership role in Leeds, and that we should do more and will do more than this, and the statement and action plan reflect this. There are 3 strands to the statement and action plan. Strand 1 has an internal focus on our people and our staff. Strand 2 focuses on service delivery and includes an emphasis on improving monitoring and reporting on outcomes. And Strand 3 has a wider focus on people and communities, such as strengthening community engagement through developing community engagement and city integration and cohesion plan. We've taken a broad partnership approach to the development of the statement and plan, and tried to cast the net as wide as possible and engaging with many partners and stakeholders. We've consulted with and received support from Equality Lead members, the Equality Assembly and Equality Hubs, Equality Staff Networks, the Corporate and Direct Equality Boards, trade unions, and the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Equality Lead, and the Safer and Stronger Communities Team Extended Leadership Team. I'd like to thank all of them for their valuable feedback and support. This paper was due to come to Exec Board some months ago, but because of the initial consultation feedback, we deferred it. And it's taken us about 9 months to get here, but I do think it was worth the wait and was right to take all the feedback we received into consideration before finalising it. It's important to stress that the work of this paper supports rather than replaces our existing equality, diversity and inclusion work, including our equality and diversity policy, equality improvement priorities and annual report. Nonetheless, we're joining up this new approach to the existing work, as there are 5 specific priorities across each 3 strands, which will formally be reported against in our annual equality reports. The timeline of our action plan is linked to our statutory equality improvement priorities too, as they are both due to be reviewed and refreshed in 2025. We will also be ensuring that this work supports and enhances the best city ambition. Rest assured, I will be monitoring progress regularly and will keep the Exec Board updated as to progress across those that are mentioned in the report. I'd like to ask that the board support the recommendations as set out.
Thank you, Councillor Harland. Are there any questions or comments on this paper, please? Councillor Golden, please.
A job well done. It's an area of excellence that the council has kept up over the years.
Thank you, Councillor Golden. If there's no more comments, I'll turn to the recommendations on page 909 and 910. I take it everybody is happy with those recommendations. Thank you, Councillor Harland. We're on to Councillor Rafiq's papers, please. Item 17.
Thank you, Chair. The report provides an update on the approach being taken to tackle damp and mould issues. The aim of the report is providing assurance that robust measures are in place to deal with the issue and that the safety of residents is being properly prioritised. The council has taken a proactive approach to damp and mould for some time. However, this report sets out the council has introduced further proactive measures through its response to the Housing Ombudsman's report as outlined on damp and mould is not a lifestyle, which was published in October 2021, and also following the recent tragic case of Awab Ishaq, the toddler who died due to prolonged exposure to excessive mould growth in his Rochdale home. The report outlines what changes have been put in place since these events, including a revised governance arrangements with Damp and Mould Prevention Board to oversee the overall damp and mould strategy, the formation of a dedicated team to respond to tenants' damp and mould reports directly from tenants, and an improved support to tenants in fuel poverty who are less able to heat and ventilate their homes. Whilst the report focuses in main on damp and mould in council homes, it also highlights the council's responsibility for enforcing against landlords in private rented sector whose homes contain damp and mould hazards. The report sets out that despite the recent instruction by Secretary of State for levelling up housing and communities for local authorities to do more to address damp and mould in private rented homes, the council's enforcement approach already goes over and above the existing statutory duty. I'll just stop there. I think the report is fairly explanatory and includes quite a bit of information. Happy to take any comments or questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rafiq. Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, the press release from the Housing Ombudsman. It's very blunt. Severe maladministration for Leeds City Council after significant failings in repeated repairs. It's a pretty damning statement, and the Ombudsman is clearly accepting no excuses for COVID or anything else. And it's a bit of a sorry tale. So, well, it's a very sorry tale, particularly for the person who lived in the property. So some assurances that there are no cases that we know of like this of category 1 damp. And I would like the director to explain to me exactly our role in the private rented sector. Does it include housing associations, because they are now big landlords in the city? And I think we need to move at some speed on this. I mean, over the years, we've heard the excuse over and over again. It's lifestyle, it's this, it's that, it's open some windows and presumably freeze to death. And now we've got right down to it at long last. Chronic damp and mould, bringing with it all the health issues it undoubtedly does, wherever, in whatever sort of house it's in. And I would like to see some action, and action quickly now. When the Ombudsman, and I take it, Chief Executive, you read the Ombudsman's press release. It's not a happy tale. And I would expect now to have reports back here on a regular basis as to the action. Not, we're thinking about this, we've got people doing this, that, and the other. Action on these properties, because they aren't just in the council's care. To be fair, they are not just in the council's care. I am worried greatly about some in the private rented sector when I see ones up to let around the city centre or just on the immediate outskirts, and I'll go past them and I think, I wonder what they're like inside. And we do need an action plan, PDQ, and just officers from all over getting their heads together and scratching them won't do. We need action.
Jez, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I'll just pick up on the Ombudsman inquiry. Just to be clear, that wasn't a Cat 1 hazard. That was actually a water leak from the property above. It did take us far too long to address that issue, and we accept the findings of the Ombudsman, and we've certainly learned from that. In terms of what we're doing around treating damp and mold in our properties, I think the paper highlights a number of the things that we picked up on, but just to give some assurance to everybody, we've put significant additional resources into the team. But it's not just that we've created a specific team within housing management, but we're actually trying to get much wider than that. So we've trained, or we're in the process of training all our staff that go into our properties to make sure that they can identify issues of damp and mold and feedback. That's not just the repairs team, but it's much wider than that. So it's housing management, it's housing officers, it's health and housing staff. Everybody we expect who goes into a property will be able to address it. We're widening our communication strategy so that tenants, are aware of the issues and how to report them and how to get that direct communication with that team. We're also enhancing our budgets as well. So I've put an additional £5 million into the repair budget. And we're also looking at the capital programme next year, which is currently in excess of £85 million, and making sure that's framed to pick up the issues around heating, ventilation and insulation. I know you mentioned lifestyle not being a factor in terms of damp and mold, and we accept that recommendation, but some of the challenges that some of our tenants have got around condensation, which can lead to damp and mold in a number of our properties, is the inability to heat their homes, and that is a direct factor. So we've been working with energy suppliers. We've secured around £120,000 worth of grants so far this year to help our customers heat the homes more efficiently. And we're also giving them information about how they can better do that and prevent condensation, because roughly 75% of all the inquiries that come into our service around damp and mold are actually caused by condensation in the properties. And that's another reason why we want to strengthen that capital programme and make sure we're in a position where we can provide better heating systems and better insulation in our homes. I think your other comment was around the private rented sector and housing associations. And yes, we are able to enforce conditions within those properties if they're not to the relevant standards. And I'll just hand over to Mark, who might be able to just give a little bit more of an update on the work we can do there.
Thank you. A housing association under the Housing Act is the same as any other private landlord. We have powers to serve notice if we need to, and we have powers to prosecute if need to. In certain instances, we have undertaken full inspections of properties belonging to certain housing associations as part of wider area agendas. So when we've done the work we've done in Holbeck, officers in the private rented team have also inspected not just our properties, but those belonging to housing associations to make sure they meet the minimum standards required.
Thank you, Mark and Jez. Tom, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, any Ombudsman's report like the one that we received, we fully accept, and it's not good enough, and we've apologised to the individual concerned, and we will respond and are responding with action. I think the Housing Ombudsman more generally has become more proactive, and I would reflect that this is an individual case that we've been, rightly identified for, but we haven't been in the situation that some others have been, where it's been a much larger number of challenges that they've had and complaints that they've had. So just to give you reassurance that we're absolutely taking that seriously. I was pleased to, once we obviously we had the tragic case over in the northwest, and once something like that happens, obviously you immediately get concerned about your own organisation. And once I'd asked the question, the team had already responded to all the accepted all the ombudsman's recommendations from a previous report on damp and mould, and had a group set up already under Councillor Rafiq to make sure that that was being taken forward. So I was encouraged by that, but I would be realistic about this. We're a huge city. We've got large numbers of private rented, as you've pointed out, and we'd like to have more ability and resource to be able to tackle that. We do what we can within the resource that's available within the regulatory framework that's available, and the national changes that have recently taken place are a step in the right direction. I was briefed by that by the national policymakers with some other chief execs recently, and we've had it on CLT agenda just to make sure we know how serious it is and important it is. But I would make the point that, you know, we would do more if we had more resource and we had more powers. We're doing what we can within that constraint, and you know, the team have a very professional approach to doing what we can within, you know, a very large private rented sector in the city, and one that needs to improve.
Thank you, Tom. Would like
Question on financing then, because it's a valid comment. It's a massive private rented estate, and the vast majority of it, I'm sure, is fine. But there's no doubt about it that there are areas which require urgent surveyor inspection. Are we bound to use the housing revenue account to finance that, or can we use the council's general resources if we wished?
Jez, would you like to come back on that, please?
Sorry, councillor, is that in relation to the private rented sector or the social housing stock? I'll let Matt pick that up, thanks.
In terms of the housing revenue account, we can't use that. We're not for the work that we do in the private rented sector, which is general fund. It's general fund.
Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's associated with paragraph 9 and paragraph 30A. And it's to do with the capacity to respond to the strategy which is being set out here. And the biggest issue seems to be the amount of people in the industry that you can call upon to do the redemptive work in properties. So it says that there is something that you're doing in terms of review current working procedures in order to create additional capacity through improved efficiency. Is that sort of a different way of saying you're going to get better productivity out of the in-house repair teams, or is it something else? And what is the process for trying to create a bigger resource in terms of numbers of people trained up?
Jez, please.
It's a couple of things, councillor. The main thing from a service perspective is being able to identify issues of damp and mould, and when those reports come into the service, we've got sufficient staff to be able to go out, survey the properties and carry out the work that's needed. I mentioned in the paper that we've already created a damp and mould team. One of the things that I'm looking at is to increase the numbers of trained surveyors I've got within that team so that we can send them out on site quickly and action these issues. The other point that we're trying to allude to in the report, that it's not just the surveyors going out and highlighting areas of damp within our social housing stock, and that it is housing officers, it is people going out and do gas servicing. It's the whole team is bought into this and being able to quickly and efficiently identify and refer those issues back. And I think once we're at that stage, we'll have a better grip on the problem at hand. Just in terms of the number of inquiries that are coming into the service, it's less than 3% of our stock at this moment that we're dealing with that have got issues of damp and mould. We are aware of a couple of property types that are more likely to see some of these issues. You'll be aware we've in the last few months, we brought a paper to board to get permission to redevelop some of our stock. And that's something that we're going to continue to do over the next year as well, where it's clear that it's not financially viable to continue improving these properties and potentially look at doing something different there.
Thank you, Jez. Councillor Rafiq, please.
Yeah, just to reassure the board that, you know, the councillor, I think, Carter pointed out the housing revenue account. The housing revenue account is ring fenced, so all the rents we collect, all the money comes in, actually goes back, invested back into. We have got a very ambitious capital programme, 85 million for next year. We're putting, like Jed said, another 5 million into repairs and maintenance to deal with the issue of dump and mould, which we take extremely seriously. We're also, I think, encouraging through the social media, through newsletters, we're encouraging all our tenants and residents to report the cases to us. I think it is a challenge when it comes to private sector, because until people come to us, then it's very difficult to kind of go and inspect every property. But we are, again, encouraging, trying to get the information out there that if there is a problem, contact us. If it's our property, we'll go out and rectify it as soon as possible. If it's private sector, then we'll go out and take property action against our landlord. So, you know, what we're doing in terms of all the measures, all the cons, and practically what if it's, you know, what we could do out there.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 923. I take it the board is happy with those recommendations. And we'll move then on to Councillor Prior's paper and item 18, please.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the Leeds Kirkgate Open Market Future Opportunities, Consultation Response and Next Steps. Members will remember we brought this to Exec Board in December, and where we agreed to go out to consultation for the potential introduction of a new container food, beverage and entertainment offer on the open market. Before I get to some of the detail of this, I just want to kind of go through some of the support we've given to the market. This whole paper and this whole strategy is about securing the long-term future of the market. So obviously we've had no rent increases in the market for over a decade now, since 2011. There was a 14 million refurb of the market back in 2016, with an additional million invested in repairs in 2019, 1.4 million of rent concessions through the pandemic. And we're going through a current round of repairs to the block shops for £10 million. That's on top of support we've done bringing new events into the market, social media training for traders to get more and more customers in. And actually, we spoke about footfall in Exec Board earlier today. Actually, post-pandemic footfall in the market recovered faster than footfall in the city centre. I've been in the past few weeks to speak to a lot of traders about this, and it's been absolutely heaving lately. It was great to see. Obviously, we welcomed Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales to the market a couple of weeks ago. She was launching her Shaping Us campaign and chose Leeds as somewhere, as we've got obviously such a good track record with children's services. So there were some fantastic links there. And despite it not being advertised, it was great to see crowds there for that visit too. And thanks to Phil and Steve and the whole markets team for how smoothly that went. So on the proposal itself, on the consultation, we had over 2,000 responses to an online survey with 71.5% generally supportive of the proposal. As I said, I've been out to speak to traders myself, as there is varying opinions from traders as would have been expected with any consultation with the market, and to reassure them that as this progresses, some of the detail still hasn't been done, and that will be done in full consultation with them. Things like the exact positioning of units and such like. I think just generally on the market, it is really important that we ensure that the future of the market for the traditional market customer, as it were, while also recognising that there are fewer of them. So to secure the long-term future of the market, it is vital we bring in more people, more trade, new customers. In terms of occupancy at the level, the current food court is at 100% occupancy. The indoor market, I think, is at around 94% occupancy. The outdoor market, quite a bit lower at about 40%. That's reflected across the country in outdoor markets everywhere. So even with these changes, it will pull the outdoor traders together to give it a good full feeling, and we will still be one of the largest outdoor markets in the country. but I will move the not move the recommendation, sorry, I will open for discussion.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments, please?
Seems to be a lack of response. Seems to be a lack of response from traders, and varied where there is. But I have to say, I support the paper, and I think they need to seize the opportunity. They really need to seize the opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. I'll turn to the recommendations on page 935 and 36. I take it the board is happy with those. So we're on to item 19, please.
Thank you. So this is the determination of school admission arrangements for 24-25. Just as a quick reminder, this only covers local authority schools. It doesn't cover academies, foundation, voluntary aided, free schools. Obviously quite a large report of this came back a few years ago. This is just an annual update, so there aren't a huge amount of changes. It is probably worth highlighting though, 3 schools. We've talked about reducing birth rate in Leeds over recent years, and in this report includes the reduction of PANS of 3 primary schools, one of which in Councillor Galton's ward, from 60 to 45. Those are all majorities in favour on consultations with those governing bodies supporting. So I'd of course like to thank those governing bodies for working with us as we adapt to the changing landscape of Leeds. But I will leave it there for introductory remarks.
Thank you. Any comments? Nope. Okay, I shall turn to the recommendations and take it board is happy with those. That's great. So we've come to the end of the public papers. This meeting, we've got 1 pink paper to undertake. So I'll thank those members of the public for attending, and see if Leeds United have got a new manager during the short break. See if anybody's been appointed. Thank you, everybody.